Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Today, we are continuing our series, Supply Chain Today and Tomorrow, with not with Greg White, but with Mike Griswold with Gartner. We're going to continue a very popular series here. Not only are we getting key insights from Mike on the year that was really close to being was in a couple weeks here, but 2020, he's going to give us some key observations there. But something I'm excited about, he's going to be sharing some of Gartner's big bets, stuff to look out for in 2021. So you're not going to want to miss it. We're going to be working really hard today to raise your supply chain IQ. Hey, quick programming note before we get started here today. If you like this conversation, be sure to find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast from and subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. Hey, programming note number 2, Greg White is off on assignment today out in the marketplace. He'll be back with us on the Buzz on Monday. You better believe it. And he'll be bringing it as always. So today, with no further ado, it's mano a mano with Mr. Mike Griswold, Vice President, Analyst with Gartner. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Good morning.
How are you? Good morning. Good to talk to you. It's great. We have all this time now to talk about Greg because he's not here. I can't wait.
Well, I'm excited because I might be able to get in 3 or 4 words in today's conversation.
Yes. So, true for both of us, actually.
That's right. Well, hey, kidding aside, we miss old Greg. I tell you, it's been
for sure.
Furious finish to the year. And but with that in mind, I'm excited about this conversation. We always enjoy this monthly dose of knowledge you bring here to Supply Chain Now. In our community, we've heard a lot about what you've shared here. So thanks so much for carving some time out, given all of the inquiries and expertise and interviews your team has been doing here in recent weeks and months.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really enjoy spending time with you guys. I enjoy the discussion with the audience as well, and I look forward to this every month. So hopefully we can keep it going for 2021.
I'm with you. I love that. We enjoy it. So let's say hello to a few folks from the audience here. Fod, hello via LinkedIn. Great to have you joined in here. Kavan, hey, great to have you back on the live streams. I've enjoyed our social interactions and hope this finds you well where you are. Pratik, good afternoon to everybody. He's tuned in via LinkedIn. He says, how are you all going to spend the holidays? Well, we're going to touch on some of that probably through the conversation, but Pratik, as to our family here, we're on the outskirts of Metro Atlanta. And as much as we'd love to, pack into the truck and take the couple-hour drive to the family, we're going to be home for the holidays, but that's okay. There's lots of good news if you look for it. So hopefully this finds you and your family well. Let's see here. Daria, really have enjoyed your social media commentary here as of late. So keep it coming, and we're going to have you make an appearance maybe on an upcoming live stream. Mike, bear with me just a minute. We've got a flurry of folks.
That's great.
It is great. Kartik, hope this finds you well via LinkedIn. Dr. Vias, greetings from Bangalore, India. Great to have you here with us. Luke Small, digital transformation guru. Great to have you here with us, Luke. Hope this you and your family this finds you well. Nikunj Patel via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. And Adalberto, hello from Brazil. Great to have you here with us via LinkedIn as well. All right. So, Mike, we've got so much stuff to talk with you and to get you to share with our audience here today. But before we get to business, we're going to start with our not so lightning round. The questions have gotten longer and longer, perhaps.
Sure.
But we've got some good ones here. So we've got 3 questions. We appreciate your sportsmanship. The first question is going to be, hey, what was one of your biggest Eureka moments this year?
Yeah, I was thinking about that before we hopped on. I'm going to go back to probably the the middle of May. We had decided, before that all of our events from the Gartner side were going to go virtual, and we had our supply chain top 25 reveal that we typically had done at the in-person event, that we had decided we were now going to do it, virtually via a webinar. And I think my big Eureka moment was not really knowing how many we would have. We had close to 3,000 people on the webinar. From a feedback perspective, it was the highest rated webinar that we've done. It was the highest rated evaluation we had gotten for the top 25. So I think the Eureka moment for me was people, even though we had to be virtual, we're still really interested in that top 25, learning from other organizations. And I think it's done well as we've carried it through in some of our monthly discussions, is people wanting to learn more about what these leading supply chains are doing. So I think that was my big Eureka moment, that it doesn't have to be in person. People just want that insight in any way that we could give it to them.
Excellent. Love that. And speaking of that top 25, which we've really enjoyed here for going back years, one of the masters category, right up at the top, folks that have been there in the top rankings for a number of years. Amazon here lately has announced that they're going to be looking to train 29 million people across the globe on tech skills. And I thought, as we're all looking for good news, that's such a great move. That continues that technology democratization movement, and we love that here. And we're looking forward to 2021's top 25 supply chain top 25 list as well. Okay, so moving right along, we of course are in the middle of holiday season per Pratik's question earlier. What has been, Mike Griswold, one of your most cherished gifts that you've received in recent years?
So it's probably going to be, I have 2 children, and I'm going to call up my daughter. So my son will probably be texting me at some point saying, what, is she the favorite? But my daughter has 3 girls, so 3 granddaughters. And every year she puts together kind of a picture collage, and it turns out either into a calendar, into a poster. Last year it turned into one of these little things that actually has its own little artist easel that I put it on in my office. So those are the ones I really appreciate. Is it just gives me a kind of a constant reminder of the grandkids, and I really like the fact that she's taken the time to put the pictures together and all that. So those are the ones that I probably cherish the most.
I love that. I love that so much. Speaking of holidays, we've got some comments here. So Gary Smith is with us, and they're talking about holidays and maybe a white Christmas. And Gary says he lived in Atlanta for 35 years, so he never got used to snow. He's now in New York City, by the way.
Oh, good luck with that. Yeah, they're getting hammered.
Yes, they are. And by the way, Gary, a lot of great feedback we've gotten on your guest appearance on This Week in Business History. Love your take on the Wright brothers story. So much of that we don't get the full story oftentimes, and you did a very nice job there, Gary. Now, Mike Avra, and Mike, hope this finds you well, says, being from South Florida, I never saw snow until I was 13 on a trip to Washington, D.C. in 7th grade. Wow, that would be quite a trip to see snow for the first time.
I was watching the Weather Channel this morning. Central Park had 10 inches, and I'm a firm believer that I never want to be at the same place at the same time as Jim Cantori, because usually those bad things happen wherever Jim is.
That is right. And then one of the comments, Sylvia Judy, great to have you back with us. And evidently it is frosty in Charleston as well. Hope this finds you and your family well. Okay, final question here in the lightning rounds. We finish up the latest lightning round with Mike Griswold from Gartner. So give us some good news. What have you found here lately in the last few weeks to be uplifting and make you feel good?
I think it's probably an easy one, and one that people I think may look and say, yeah, that's obvious, but it is to me. It's been the whole discussion around the vaccine. I think the fact that it's out, it's being administered around the world. I don't know that I would necessarily have picked a 90-year-old woman in the UK to be the very first person I vaccinated, but the fact that it's out, and on the news, I'm now hearing many more stories around the distribution strategy. Where's it going? Who's going to get it? And I'm hearing, I would rather hear that than hear the continuous story of how many cases we have, how many deaths we have, and all that. So to me, the good news is that we have a vaccine. I think it, frankly, is probably here sooner than people really thought it would be. But the fact that it's here, it's being distributed around the world, I think gives me hope that we might have a chance to having a better 2021 than we had 2020.
Well put. And while there's certainly plenty of money being made in the vaccine distribution, there's also a lot of what we're calling the noble mission, and there are lots of things that are taking place with no concerns for profitability.
Right.
We've been talking with folks, some of our dear friends in Africa, and some of the challenges they have there. No bridges across rivers that we talked about earlier on Monday on the Buzz, and we've got our as some have put it, this is a global supply chain community's calling. This is why we exist. So really, I think there is, to your point, a lot of good news there. Now, on a much different level, we went around the horn a bit last week and talked about some of the good news we've seen out in the marketplace. We've got a regular live stream participant, Rhonda with Global Trans, and they were amongst a wide variety of companies that were recognized as one of the 2020 Green Supply Chain Award winners. Sally Eves talked about that Amazon story where they're going to take it upon themselves to train all those millions of people, and which should open the doors for all kinds of opportunities,
sure,
career-wise. Those are great stories, and in this day and age where there's no shortage of bad and challenging news, there's plenty of good news if you look for it. And I think we can drop that link in the comments. Okay, so I want to say hello to a few additional folks before we start to really get down to business and get some of what Mike has prepared for our audience here today. Peter, greetings from Montreal. He says it's -16 Celsius. Wow, we shouldn't be complaining, Mike. I don't know, at least not here in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I mean, I keep a couple of numbers handy. 0 Celsius is 32 us. So they're getting in probably low double digits at -16 would be my guess.
Oh gosh. David, who is up in Canada, -21. David, hope this finds you.
There you go.
David, really enjoyed, I think it was on the Buzz on Monday. You had your sense of humor was dialed in. So y'all keep it coming here today. Great to have you, and hope this finds you and your family doing well. Let's see here. And then Sophia, great to see you here. Have enjoyed lots of your social media commentary, and I think you just made an appearance with our friend Sarah up at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So good stuff there, Sophia. Keep it coming. All right. So Mike, full house here today, and that doesn't surprise me, given what you bring month in and month out. So let's talk about some of I think we're going to build a list of three really important key takeaways or observations here for 2020. So where do we want to start there?
Yeah, I think the first one is, and if anyone had the chance to attend any of our virtual summit sessions, one of the recurring themes during the keynotes was this idea of ongoing turbulence and continuous disruption. We've been talking about that for a couple of years at our events. It was a theme a couple of years ago, and I think what I'm seeing and hearing, and what I think we're gearing up for is a series of disruptions over the next few years that are going to affect the supply chain. I'm hoping that there is nothing that is the magnitude of the duration that we're going through now. But I think many organizations have taken an opportunity to take a look at how have they responded through this disruption, what have they learned, and what can they put in place in the organization that allows them to better respond to the next disruption. My concern or my caution for folks is to think that this is our last disruption, because there were disruptions before COVID. COVID is certainly a disruption, and there are going to be disruptions afterwards. Like I said, hopefully not as big. But I think that my big takeaway from 2020 is the fact that many organizations took the opportunity to revisit things like risk playbooks, build them out, think even differently about what risk looks like, right? I think we talked on one of our episodes around, in most retailers' early playbooks, there never would have been a page that says your stores are closed for 3 months.
Right.
Literally closed. No people in, no people out. Now it needs to be, right? It needs to be a page. How do you ramp up e-commerce and those types of things? So I think getting used to disruption, excuse me, and how your organization has learned to deal with that, I think is one of the big takeaways for me in 2020.
Excellent point. And one of the big four firms came out with exhaustive research not too long ago to your point about expect major disruption every 3.8 years. And Lord knows we are not hoping that is in the form of pandemics.
Right.
But to your point, you're absolutely right. That's just where we live. That's the name of the game here moving forward. So, all right, before we get your second big observation, I want to share a couple of things here. David says at 19 degrees Celsius, we start turning on the AC. Love that.
Yeah. Almost 68.
We had one other comment here. I'm going to try to find. Oh, here we go. So Paula is tuned in via Kansas City, and the weather has been being diverted around. But Paula, great to have you here. Greetings to you and your family there in the heart of the country, and hope this finds you well. All right. So let's move right along. So what's the second big observation here from 2020, Mike?
I think if I were to categorize kind of the hot topic inquiry that we took across all organizations, it would boil down to resiliency and agility. And my guess is people that are in the supply chain profession are probably tired of hearing that. In fact, if you talk to our chief of research, Mike Uskert, he would tell you that we're probably going to try to ban those Y words, resiliency and agility, in 2021. But those are important topics. And I think what my takeaway from 2020 was there may have been a tendency pre-pandemic for people to use resiliency and agility interchangeably. And I think what's emerged during this disruption is the distinction between the two, right? Agility being how quickly can I respond and adapt to some type of disruptions or change. And the resiliency piece is literally what's my time to survive and what's my time to recover? And how do I build both of those capabilities into my supply chain? How do I, reconfigure and redesign my supply chain to be more agile? But also, how do I look at my existing processes and my relationships with suppliers potentially? How do I make myself more resilient? And I think being able to clearly define those two within your organization, that was my big takeaway, or one of the big takeaways I think from 2020, is more and more organizations are now recognizing those are really two different things, and we need to treat them, manage them, and configure our supply chain to deal with both of those.
Excellent. And clearly you're soliciting some great feedback from the comments, and we'll share that in a moment. Monday on the Buzz with our friends Paul from Verison and a few others, we talked about this article from Supply Chain Brain that was focused on how to create anti-fragile supply chains. Instead of using that resilient word, it's anti-fragile, which really, anytime a word becomes cliche, it really takes away. We talked about at least earlier this week. It takes away a lot of the power and impact of the word, right? Because folks get used to hearing it. They all of us stop thinking what it really means, perhaps. So I like your commentary there. And let's share a few comments from the audience here. So Sylvia, adding transparency to the Y words. Absolutely.
Yes.
Kavan, disruptions continuously occur. Resilience mitigates the effects. Hashtag get prepared. Michael says recovery time is crucial. Excellent point there. And Pratik, I want to finish here before we get your third observation, Mike. Pratik's got some really interesting questions. And let's see here. How should the companies build their inventory in future, keeping in mind the magnitude of disruption like this of COVID? Should they believe less in lean system by stocking more, or the opposite? Mike, any initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's a great call out, Pratik. I think one of the things that had started to happen pre-COVID, if I think about where I spend most of my time, which is in retail, I think because of what was a upward trajectory of e-commerce volume, it certainly went more like this when COVID hit, but it was already ramping up. People were already asking themselves the question, do we have enough inventory, right? Do we have it in the right spot? So the lean discussion and the whole just-in-time discussion, I think, was starting to slow down. because we had this volume that we were fulfilling out of the stores. So I think, to your question, I think the lean discussion is still going to get parked for a while. I think because of some of these customer requirements, but also I think as we try to understand how do we mitigate some of these disruptions, part of it is going to have to be asking ourselves questions around, the reliability of the demand signal. Do I need to buffer for that? The reliability of my suppliers. Do I need to buffer for that? So I think what we're going to find is probably more buffering than we would have been comfortable with probably just 2 years ago. But I think we've got to be more comfortable with that because of these other external influences that are going to affect supply, some of which we can control, a good chunk of which we can't control. And at the end, we still need to provide some level of a customer experience.
Excellent point. And talk about current hot priorities, that customer experience, employee experience, user experience. So much work going into those areas and for the foreseeable future for sure. But to your point, what's also going to be interesting as it relates to inventory is the impact of the vaccine distribution on some of that current infrastructure that's being used to move food and frozen food in particular, fresh fruits and vegetables, and for that matter also how the ripple effect is going to impact how cargo moves in, especially in and out of airports around the world. So look to our audience. I'd love to get y'all to weigh in on that. Those kind of the unintended consequences of fulfilling the noble mission would be really interesting. Okay, so let's add a couple. So David wanted to address Pratik's question. I think you're going to see a combination. The lean system will not be as lean as companies try to have a little more cushion, as Mike was talking about as well, as things get back to normal. But you will not see stocking more increase too exponentially, only slightly.
I would agree. And I think what you're also going to see is I think, some more work done around targeted inventory builds, right? Maybe towards specific customers, maybe towards critical components. If I have, a bill of materials I need to build to that will lead to a finished product. So I do think there's going to be builds. I agree with that. I also think it's going to be targeted, right? And really try to understand, where do I need to hedge my bets with inventory? Again, geared around that whole customer experience.
Excellent point. Let's see here. Gary says resiliency plus agility equals adaptability. That is the secret to supply chain success.
I like that.
I do too. I think, Gary, you have that on your email signature as well. I love that. And then Sophia says, also speaking to Pratik's question, I think it depends, but both strategies could work together across your supply chain. One does not exclude the other entirely. Better inventory distribution is key to being responsive, especially as you get closer to the consumer. And as one of our Mike, as one of our last one of my favorite episodes this year was with our friends over at Kinaxis who coined this term that supply chain is keeper of the last touch to the consumer. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and I think one of the things organizations have to wrestle with internally, is internal education around the role that inventory plays as it relates to our friends in finance. Certainly, I think what we're going to see is more inventory carried on the balance sheet. We're going to see probably lower inventory productivity because we're carrying more inventory for all the right reasons. So I think that discussion needs to happen between the supply chain and the CFO as an example, because typically if we rewind the clock, right, where was the first place finance went to look for taking money out of the business? It was inventory, right? So that conversation, I think, needs to continue to happen.
Great point. And I'm hoping consumers are so savvy these days, right? They are all this data at their fingertips. They've certainly learned a lot more about supply chain and how e-commerce works. I'm hoping they also learn some of those kind of behind closed doors decisions and why inventory has been impacted. That's a great point, Mike. All right. So you know what we're missing? We've got way too much agreement here, Mike. We're missing Greg White, our dear Greg White, who to our audience, some of y'all that may have tuned in here late. Greg White is out in the field on assignment, big special project. And hey, here's a little challenge. Let's have some fun. If you've got a hot take on something, drop it in the comments. Make sure you put hot take in front, because we need to have Greg White represented in his in spirit here today. All right, so a few comments from our audience here. David says less product lines will lead to less SKUs. Great point. We've seen a lot of Mike. Every time we get together, we talk about SKU rationalization. It seems.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, my reaction to that is I've had conversations on both sides of that with the consumer products companies that are rationalizing their SKUs, the retailers who are the consumers of that. My concern, and I think I've shared this here with the audience before, my concern is we're doing a lot of really good work, I think, and have done a lot of good work on rationalizing the SKUs. How many flavors of ketchup do I need? The minute we get any glimpse of normalcy, we forget all about SKU rationalization. So we need to find a way to kind of keep the decisions that we made sticky, because they were the right decisions to make around rationalization. We got to really resist the urge to kind of let our SKUs bloat again, because that's my concern. And then we are back into a case where we've got lots of the wrong inventory, and that in of itself can drag down our productivity.
Great point. And I wonder if it's going to spur more innovation. It's not a new thing anymore, but like Coke's Freestyle machine, where you didn't have to have all of the individual products. You could make it there right at the point of sale. I've loved it because I can never get cherry caffeine-free Diet Coke anywhere.
Yep.
Except
Same
those
here.
Freestyle machines. Yeah. So we're curious to see how that develops. Let's take a few comments here. So Big Show Bob Bova, great to have you here, Bob. As micro fulfillment centers proliferate, the inventory will increase and regional analysis will help with correct levels.
Yeah, Robert, that's a great point. I mean, I think we've seen with the growth in e-commerce, the analysts that look at e-commerce fulfillment would tell you that we've seen an incredible growth in inquiry around micro fulfillment centers and dark stores. I think we were headed that way, but what COVID did is when we had 30, 40, 50% increase in store order requirements, that quickly pushed people to say we're going to continue to hemorrhage money if we don't find a better way to do it. So my expectation for 2021 is there's going to be a lot more that we read about in this area of micro fulfillment centers, because it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, great point there. Peter says, add to that inventory visibility while in transit, goods in transit, and where they are along the route to the customer. It's a great call out, Peter, because consumers want to know. How many memes we've seen here lately about what I see on Facebook a couple times here. That package is in the good Lord's hands. No one knows but he where it is here. We've seen a lot of that here lately. Nirfad says, I used to be resilient and nimble and agile, but then I added donuts to my diet. Now I'm just resilient. Donut inventory is still stable though. I love that. And let's see, Gary agrees with you. There will be targeted inventory builds, especially with PPE. Great point. Medical equipment and other key materials. But here's something, Mike, that I read about a month or two ago, perhaps. 3D printing, especially as it relates to masks. There are companies, and it's being led by the VA, some of these initiatives are stockpiling electronic designs and some of the materials needed for 3D printing to be prepared to ramp up really quick production of masks. And that's pretty neat. Coming from our household where Amanda ramped up the domestic mask production. She was sewing masks left and right a few months back and sending it off to different folks that we know in healthcare. It'll be interesting to see how 3D printing can be applied and alleviate some of these shortfalls for PPE, huh?
Yeah, I think there certainly is an opportunity in the 3D printing. My wife went through the same thing. It's interesting though, as a supply chain guy, her and I had conversations. You talked earlier, Scott, about some of the unintended consequences. You go into, at least at the time, you went into your local craft store, and the elastics were out of stock. There weren't enough elastics that you needed for the masks. So it's some of these other ancillary things that become critical for people to want to do things themselves that, as a company, as a supply chain, we need to be thinking about not just the big things that are highly visible, but some of these components like elastic and like even some of the fabric those become critical as well for us to figure out how do we manage those.
Excellent call out. Excellent call out. And I remember going store to store trying to find any kind of elastic to keep up with production here.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more comments, and then we're going to get your last observation of 2020. Sylvia says, my tier 1 and OEM customers are in overdrive to build up inventory by including their logistics providers in the process. Love that. Transparency plus agility equals resilience. And, if we've seen anything here in recent years, not elbowing people out of conversations, but bring them in so that they're more informed about what's coming. That's who would have thunk it, Mike? Who would have thunk?
Yeah, I think the other thing to that comment, I had a conversation with a paint manufacturer around their S&OP process, and I use them as an example for folks that in general, make stuff, because what they're wrestling with is right now they cannot keep up with demand. People are in their homes. People want to do their own craft stuff. So I mean, they're painting everything. But at some point, we'll reach a tipping point where people decide, okay, I want to get outside. The money I would have spent on paint, I'm not going to spend on something else. So what they're wrestling with, and what I think other companies are wrestling with, is at what point do I stop this frenetic buildup of inventory because I have unmet demand? And when do I start to think about, okay, I've got enough demand in the market. Let's let that kind of get absorbed naturally and then pick up a new demand signal. I have the same conversation with one of the sporting good retailers I work with who's trying to figure out bikes, right? There are no bikes around because people decided, hey, we're in lockdown. I can at least ride my bike around. So there were no bikes in the market. Now their question is, okay, has everyone bought a bike, and is there no more people to buy bikes, or do I need to build inventory back up in the event that there's another run on bikes? So that whole balancing where we are and where we're going to be, I think, is really important for people that are in the business of making things, because that to me is you run the risk of the paint people ramping up all this production and then be sitting on millions and millions of gallons of paint because people are tired of painting.
Great point. And in fact, Mike says bullwhip effect multiplied by a pandemic. Mike,
Yep.
Great point.
Yep.
And finally, Jeff says in 10 years, this might be a hot take, we'll be 3D printing food, airdropping printers into natural disaster areas, kind of like the food generators on Star
Trek. Yeah, exactly. None of it looked very good, but yeah.
Mike, I'm just glad you knew what I was talking about. I was worried I was going to be the only Trekkie here out of the two of us today. All right. And Pratik, you're asking some great questions in the comments, so y'all keep that up. All right. So let's get your last observation here on 2020. Sure. We may have touched on it already, but please share.
Yeah, I think it's the underlying importance of talent. One of the things I'm going to talk about in our big bets is this idea of, the social supply chain and the social organization. And I think, finding talent, particularly in some of those high demand areas, like data scientists and machine learning, I think are going to be really important moving forward. I think finding, how we're going to use that talent in terms of deploying it within the organization is huge. And if I think about, some of our busiest analysts at Gartner over the last 6 months have been the talent analysts.
Right.
Everything from, how do we go from an environment that was, we discouraged working from home, to now an environment where everyone has to work from home, to now an environment where, hey, this actually worked. Maybe we never want to come back to the office, right? So, I encourage people to really think about proactively, how you thought about talent in 2020, and then certainly how do you think about talent in 2021. The other big area that we're focusing on as a Gartner company, but also in our research and advice, is the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is becoming more and more important, I think, to potential applicants and potential additions to the organization. And I also think it's just an important thing for an organization to be able to articulate what are the steps that we're doing in these areas that will help us be, a better have our work environment better represent the world population, right? And those things to me are going to be huge as we move into 2021.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Mike, it's been pointed out when we have conversations that focus explicitly on diversity, equity, and inclusivity, is oftentimes the inclusivity part is forgotten. We had Steve Sterling with us, Dr. Steve Sterling with us, who has a fascinating story. And he was talking about as many companies in his career, they sought out the diverse workforce and brought them in and really made a lot of progress there and action there. However, there was no attention being paid to inclusivity. And once they're part of the team, making them feel part of the team.
Right.
And that's a really important distinction as we have this conversation. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no, I agree, Greg. I mean, you can basically lose any progress you made on the D and the E if you don't have the I, right? And the I really, I think, takes hold as people are in the organization and are part of the organization. It is that inclusivity. We've done a lot of work at Gartner with forming what we call mosaic groups, which are really targeted at different veterans and different breakdowns of different types of people to help them feel included. And then how do we, within the course of our daily lives at Gartner, how do we become more inclusive? Because you're exactly right. Without that, it doesn't work, right? People
Agreed.
end up leaving, and you have to start the cycle all over with. So I agree completely. The I is really important.
Love that. And Clay and Amanda, we need to capture some of what Mike just shared there and throw it in the comments. I love that, because you can't be successful in the D and E unless you really invest in the I. It's a great point.
Well, we've also, Scott, we've also got some research that has come out of some of our analyst groups that actually has linked organizations, DE and I initiatives with financial performance.
Absolutely.
And basically the bottom line is it helps the bottom line when you are more diverse, equitable, and have this inclusive culture in your organization. It adds to the bottom line.
Well, agreed. So even if speaking generally, if you're out there and you don't believe in DEI, hey, you got to believe in the bottom line, and there's financial return. So find that reason to do it and act and lead. Okay. One quick question, and then we'll move over to the big bets. I'm looking forward to that. But you brought up talent before we kind of took this path, and wrong click there. AA, hope this finds you well there in the air capital of the world in Wichita, Kansas. He says, I agree. There will be a big demand for data analysts, and there will be a shortage as well. Any additional thoughts on how we close that gap, Mike, or anything you're seeing from companies to close that gap?
Yeah, I think I don't know that would necessarily. It's a great question. I don't know that I would necessarily classify it as closing the gap, because I do think there is a gap, and the gap will continue, I think, unfortunately, to widen as we have more of a request on the supply side or on the demand side, and we have less on the supply side. One of the things we're asking companies to think about at least is to start to build that talent gap roster and start to aggressively look to fill that gap now. We're also encouraging folks to. We have a body of research where we've ranked, created a top 25 college and university list around supply chain curriculums for both graduate and undergraduate. To me, that's kind of a shameless plug to say that's a good place to look in terms of starting to reach into these college and universities, grab these students early, interns, thesis projects, all those types of things are great ways to introduce a student to your organization with maybe a long-term hope that they will kind of come back to you when they get out of school. So to me, one of the ways is early outreach. That's one way I think we can start to close the gap. And I know there are lots of other pieces of research to look at. So maybe just look at different research that's ranking these curriculums, these schools by their curriculum, maybe in some of these focus areas like data science, and then just start to reach into those colleges early.
Excellent point. And tip of the hat to, I believe, Arkansas was the number one ranked school on the list. And also tip of the hat to Natalie and Lori and Allie and Devin, who make up our associates here at Supply Chain Now. And I wish I was as smart as they are when I was in college. It's amazing what they can do. So big high five to each of them. And finally, I was a bit late to the party as it relates to platforms like Upwork and Fiverr. And to our audience, y'all can find some great talent for projects or mini gigs there via those platforms. Okay. So let's switch gears here. Let's move into what you have coined big bets for 2021, things to keep your eyes on for 2021. So please do share, Mike.
Yeah. So we've got, as we think about our research for 2021, one of the things we were focusing on is really the area around the chief supply chain officer in particular, and what are some of those areas of interest that we think are going to be important to him and her. And I've got kind of 5 that I want to touch on. So maybe let me get through them, Greg, and maybe just see what we get from a questions perspective, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
So one of them is around risk, and we're going to write a series of notes around supply chain risk, and that's everything from how do you develop kind of a risk playbook through to, one of the things I see as a risk is how do organizations define their supply chain? How do they view it? Do they view their supply chain as a competitive weapon? Do they view their supply chain as, something I just have to have? I think the former are where leading organizations go. Organizations that see their supply chain as a necessary evil, I think they're going to run into trouble as we move forward. Second area I mentioned is the social organization. And in particular, I think, what does it mean now that we have, for at least, I would suggest, another year, a very remote and diverse workforce? How do you keep, that inclusivity we talked about, Scott? How do we keep that? How do you build that into the culture? And what does it mean in 2021 to be a social organization? What are the skill sets we need? Is there a technology enabler that we need? But this idea of a social organization, I think, is going to be a hot topic for us next year. We talked a little bit earlier about, the bottom line as it relates to DE&I. We had this conversation, if I'm sure people remember years ago, around sustainability, right? Initially it was, let's be sustainable because it's a cool thing to do. We also now know that being sustainable can drive lots of dollars to the bottom line. So this idea of a circular economy, how do we design products at the beginning of their life with their end of life in mind? That's becoming a really hot topic for us. I think there's a sustainability angle to this, but there's also an impact to the supply chain angle as well. And thinking about all of the supply chain ramifications as products, near their end of life, that we need to be aware of as a supply chain. The one, though, that I think will probably get the most traction of all of them is the future design of the organization, particularly as it relates to the supply chain. I think there's elements of the remote workforce. There's elements of span and control. I think there's elements of what does a supply chain organization look like in a consumer products company that maybe looks differently than a retail, which might look differently than a life sciences company. So the future of supply chain org design, I think, is going to be a topic that's going to resonate. It's one of the hot topics this year, and I think that will continue into next year. And then lastly, the metrics of the future. So I know I've spent a lot of time with everyone here talking about our hierarchy of metrics. I think one of the things that we're going to be looking for in the future of metrics is the next evolution, which is how do we get more prescriptive or predictive in our metrics. If you were to look at our hierarchy of metrics, I would raise my hand and say most of it is still rearward looking. Right. How did we do? Not how are we going to do? And I think the future of our metrics, Scott, with all the things you alluded to earlier with machine learning and AI, we need to evolve our metrics into what do we think is going to happen? And then therefore, what actions do I want to take to mitigate that? That to me is the future of our metrics. So those 5 things I think are where we're going to see a lot of interest, and it's definitely where we're putting a lot of our research energy for the analyst community.
Love that. I love the last one was one of my favorites, hierarchy of metrics. I instantly think, Now, Mike, I've been in and out of over 300 plants in my career. And one of the things you see in so many, especially manufacturing plants, is that scoreboard of metrics. And some plants have like a wall, and you instantly get lost into what really is important. And what I love how you talk about is, rather than, that traditional rearview mirror approach and application of metrics, hey, let's let's look forward and figure out what we can change today to avoid even any of the waste of resources or time or human capital, you name it. So I love that hierarchy of metrics. New phrase for me.
Yeah, let me give you an example of that. So in almost everyone's hierarchy of metrics today, you're going to see something around inventory productivity, turns, days of supply, weeks of supply, even GMROI. I would argue all of those are telling me what happened last month relative to inventory.
Right.
One of the metrics we're talking to people about now is one called IQR, inventory quality ratio, which basically says, here's my inventory, here's how that inventory compares to my forecast, and how much inventory do I have that I would say is healthy because it will cover the forecast in the forward-looking time period. How much is unhealthy because basically I don't have a consumer for it. So it's just those types of things that get us to shift from, turns last month were whatever, what do I do about it, to this is how much unhealthy inventory I'm sitting on right now. How do I get ahead of it? How do I turn it healthy? How do I reduce the unhealthy? So it's examples like that we really want people and us, frankly, I mean, to be perfectly inwardly looking, right? We need to do a better job of that as well on the Gartner side, about how do we get some of those more proactive metrics out there.
Excellent point. So new acronym, community, new acronym here, IQR, inventory.
Merry Christmas, because we all needed more acronyms.
Inventory quality ratio. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Good stuff there. Love that. There's so much attention and interest in inventory for sure. It makes me think. Deborah Dahl is a friend of the show, and she loves talking inventory. That's exactly where my mind goes. All right, so let's say hello to a few folks. It looks like one comment in particular. We may have our hot take of the day here from Pratik. So Pratik, thanks for helping us keep Greg in with us in spirit. Unfortunately, we have always been thinking about minimizing the gap between demand and supply of products, raw materials, etc., but spend very little time in managing the gap between demand and supply of the people behind making this job done. Excellent point.
Excellent point. I mean, I think the other thing we need to think about as it relates to demand, and I have this conversation with retailers in particular, is, part of the challenge we see in retail is we acquire demand planning skills, we train them, and we get them to a really good spot, and then they get poached by someone else in the organization because we haven't really built for them a supply chain planning career path.
Right.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case in other industries. I think it might be, but I think my message to that earlier comment around how do you maybe fill that gap, not only is it reaching people sooner, but it's also having a career path for them, but also recognizing a lot of the younger workforce, they want to hop around, right? They want to have multiple experiences within your organization. So how do you balance that between, I want to skill someone up and make them really good, but I don't really want to lose them. But what's best for the organization is to have these people bounce around and get different experiences. So
agreed.
Again, when I think about that research around not only the social organization, but the org design piece, that whole career progression and career strategy is going to be a key component of both of those.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Sophia says inventory quality ratio, always learning new things with Mike. I completely agree. AA says, love those Gartner matrices. They are becoming must-have guidelines for R&D. You've got a fan club around here, Mike. I'm going to need to get your autograph. Let's see.
I need
here.
to get Christmas cards out to these people.
That's right. Kevon says the metrics of the future. Great point. Yeah, I think that's my favorite part. And then Gary, number 4 again. What was number 4 on Big Bets?
Number 4 was the future org design of the supply chain.
That's right. Good stuff. And Gary, the replay will be available for sure. Okay, and looks like Pratik agrees with Sophia. So, Mike, I tell you, it's monthly. The demand for Mike Griswold might be weaker. We'll see. We have to measure that demand, right? Sneha, I hope this finds you well. She says, I have done the forward-looking analysis for E&O in the past, but again, it is already in the excess category. Great to have you here with us, Sneha. All right, so Mike, as we start to close here, I want to make sure folks know how to connect with you and connect with Gartner. What would be your suggestions there?
Yeah, probably the easiest is just mike.griswold@gartner.com. Gartner.com is a good place to learn more about Gartner. I think I mentioned this last month. I have started, although it's not New Year's yet, my New Year's resolution is to be a much more responsible LinkedIn participant. Right now, I think non-existent is probably doing myself justice. I'm whatever's below non-existent around LinkedIn. So I need to do a better job of that, because that would be, I think probably an easier and a more 2021 way of getting a hold of me is like LinkedIn. So that's my goal right now. Probably emails is the best.
Outstanding. So folks, y'all reach out to Mike, and I think we've got his LinkedIn profile via the one click in the show notes. So check that out. I think we also have the Gartner URL as well. All right, Mike, by the way, Davin says, love it, Mike. I told you he needed his own show, Scott. I agree with you. I'll tell you, Mike Griswold, you've got death, taxes, and the U.S. Post Office is very reliable, right? Mike Griswold is number 4 on that list. So always
I appreciate that.
Brings it. You bet. All right. So Mike, thanks so much. Really enjoyed today's conversation. Enjoyed this series. We missed Greg for sure. I know he would.
Well, just a little bit.
Well, I know he would have enjoyed. We both enjoy these conversations and what you bring each time. Very thought provoking. Best wishes through the holidays for you and your family there in Idaho, and we look forward to seeing you again here in 2021. How about that?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that's just around the corner, isn't it? Like I said in the beginning, Scott, I really appreciate spending time with you and you and the team, and I love the interaction with the folks that are kind enough to carve out some time to spend with us. I wish all of them happy holidays, stay safe, and yeah, love to come back whenever you can fit me in, because I know you guys are pretty busy as well.
Well, we'll have to go through your agent for long. So, but hey, really enjoyed it. All the best, and we'll see you hopefully in the next few weeks.
That sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. What a conversation, fast moving. We couldn't even get to all the great comments and questions in the comments. That's always the case. There's so much to talk about when Mike joins us here. And we didn't even have Greg here. Usually we have a nice, fast moving conversation between the three of us, and we get as many comments and questions from the community here as we can. But really, hey, to our community and all the folks in the audience, really enjoyed each of those comments and remarks. And, just like Mike always brings it, y'all always bring it. And that's what really makes this journey and these shows very rewarding. So, but we got a little treat here today. So I look forward to having Greg back with us on Monday, where we have a special guest in Demosthenes Perez. So y'all look for that on the Buzz at 12 noon on Monday. But here today, we have Amanda Luton and Clay Phillips joining us on the stream. Hey, Amanda, Clay, good afternoon. Hello. How y'all doing?
Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Great.
Hey, every show with Mike, we miss Greg here today, but every show, Mike brings it each and every time, doesn't he?
He sure does. He's one of my very favorite guests, live stream, episode, you name it. He can break it down and make complex supply chain concepts really simple.
Agreed. Hey, we've got a first time. Let's see here. Madison Snoots. First time listening via LinkedIn. Madison, great to have you here. And hopefully you make connections with all the other community members there. The sharpest community, certainly in global supply chain, Clay, if not global business. What you think?
I would have to agree with you, Scott. Welcome, Madison, and hope you stick with us.
That's right.
I would typically be welcoming you in the comments, Madison. That's the role I play on the live streams. So,
well, don't sell yourself short. One of the
no
things, before I get y'all's big key takeaway from Mike and maybe some good news, it's important to note to pull off these conversations and to really hopefully allow folks to engage and participate as much as we can. It takes a village, and Amanda and Clay are often behind the scenes here, working fast and furiously, maybe harder than Greg and I, just to keep up with great content like Mike and what's shared in the comments. So big thanks to what Amanda, you and Clay have done here in our live streaming, especially here in 2020. So, okay. So let's see. T Squared didn't get the deep nourishment, he says, but he got a light snack. So T Squared always holds down the fort on YouTube for us. So great to have you with us here today. And there's one other thing I wanted to share here. Let's see. Paula says diverse workforce includes the experienced workers who are laid off and can bring their expertise to the gap. I agree with you, Paula. That is a great comment, because diversity comes in so many different forms, not the very traditional definitions that all of our minds might go to. It is all walks of life. So that's a great point. All right. So let's start with you, Amanda. What is one thing, what was your favorite part about what Mike Griswold shared here today?
My favorite part was one of the very first things that he mentioned, is that, COVID-19 coronavirus is not our first disruption. It's not going to be the last disruption. There were disruptions before, and there's going to be ones going forward. Hopefully not quite on the level as COVID-19 has been. But, we can't get comfortable. And what's that old Boy Scout motto? Be prepared, always be prepared.
Be prepared.
And I think, what 2020 taught us more than anything, and I'm a very positive, optimistic, glass half full kind of a person, always. So I'm always trying to think of, okay, well, what can I learn from this situation? What's the silver lining? And I think if it's taught us anything, it's taught us what to focus on, what's important, what is not important, what we don't need to focus on. Also, where our strengths lie and where we have opportunities, where our weaknesses are. And really kind of focus in on those things right now, and then make adjustments going forward.
Excellent.
Yeah,
key takeaways there. Clay, what was your favorite part of what Mike shared?
I'm gonna have to piggyback on Amanda here, and then probably the 3.8 years thing, the major disruption, and it makes you kind of think, look back on the past segment, 3.8 years in the past, and if you can identify those disruptions and take into account, the things that led up to those disruptions. And of course, no one will ever be able to predict another pandemic like this, but there's so much value in the data and the research that came out of 2020 and how to predict and deal with situations like this, and we're still learning. So, obviously, we all hope and pray that nothing like this happens again anytime soon. But like Amanda said, you have to be prepared. And Scott, I love that.
Were you a Boy Scout? I didn't think that.
I went to one Boy Scout meeting, and it was to get a baseball card. And my mom said, take you to get this baseball card that they were giving out for free, and I never went back. But
that's like me and Brownies. I went one time, and they told us we had to go camping. I'm like, y'all have fun. I'm good.
Well, we have a similar experience. I think I made one Cub Scout meeting, and it didn't stick. But my church had something called RAs, which was kind of the church version of Boy Scouts, and that's where I spent all of my formative years, on RA campouts and some other stuff. So that you made me think of that, Clay. So now I've got to go back and find pictures and badges and stuff. Let's see. Kavan says, learn from the situation. Great point. Let's see. I was going to share one other thing here from the comments. Pratik. Let's see here. Well, I cannot find it. There were so many comments and stuff to keep up with them today. But, Madison, let us know where you are tuned in from, and any other first-time community members that joined the live stream today for the first time. Let us know where you are listening from. All right. We're going to wrap on some good news. So let's start. Amanda, give us one thing, good news in a nutshell. And by the way, Rhonda, I think that's Rhonda, the LinkedIn user that we don't see. Great to have you here. Congrats on the recognition. And we need to bring Rhonda back. I saw her do some health and wellness, well-being, best practices. That'd be a great show topic. So we'll have to
that would
reconnect
especially
with Rhonda.
with the year.
That's right. All right. So Amanda, give us some good news.
Yeah. So on a personal note, the Luton Academy here at our house is finishing up this semester with 100% graduation rate, as our 3 kids are finishing digital learning. I think if I double check and I'm correct, our middle child will finish up all of her exams and turn in all of her work this afternoon and will be totally done. So that is very exciting because they're going to be going back to in-person regular school, regular learning come January, as long as, everything stays okay here. So that is really exciting, especially since yesterday we had a couple of marathon Zoom meetings, and I had 15 or 20 minutes in between each, and I was on Zoom, and then I switch over and I was helping our oldest, our 6th grader, with her math exam. Then I'd switch back in Zoom, and then I'd switch back over and do a science exam. I mean, it was a crazy day, but we're wrapping it up. And I tell you, talk about learning, learning from the situation and which you can take from those experiences. I would not wish the pandemic on my worst enemy ever. I don't want to go through it again, but I learned a lot about my kids, and I learned a lot about what I retained from 6th grade math class. That's for sure. But I'm thrilled to be done. And I got a little choked up yesterday when Brantley finished her exams, because I was just so proud of her. I'm so proud of the kids and how resilient they are, and how, of course, they're very excited to go back to school too, to see their friends, and also, of course, to see a normal teacher, not me. But it's good news. I'm just proud that we finished up, and they did pretty well. And I think they learned maybe 1 or 2 things over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, 17 months.
How you would fare on that show? Are you smarter than a 5th grader?
Yeah, now I think I would probably do pretty well. I was thinking of all the things, cross multiplying and dividing and solving for X and all these things I was pulling out. I'm like, where in the back of my brain, did I store this for all these years? But
well, lesson learned. Glad it's over. Love our teachers. We sure. Have learned the hard way all that they do, and think about all the having a class of 50 or 30 or whatever the numbers are, and everyone learns differently. They're from different walks of life, and you got to adjust your teaching. I'm sure I'm not a pro by no means, but it really a greater sense of appreciation for our teachers. And one of the challenges that it's brought us, I think thankfully one of the silver linings is going to be related to this pandemic is the technology gap, the access to technology gap.
Oh man,
we've got to make sure. We've got to work hard to make sure no one's left behind in these types of situations that may not have the technology resources to get you through and to enable distance learning effectively, where kids are really learning.
There were so many times throughout these last few months that I was just saying a prayer, thanking, for having technology, for having enough computers that each of our kids was able to access their digital learning, and that Scott and I can both stay home, and we're working from home. We don't have, we're not having to go into work or go into an office or anything. There are just so many times that I thought things like that just how lucky, how blessed we are, and how it's probably not the case for a lot of people.
Folks, that's right.
It's really, really unfortunate.
Big shout out to the one and only Kim Winter. Man, he's been interviewing left and right. A lot of great conversations, a lot of big movers and shakers. So I hope this finds you well there in Dubai. So great to have you here, Kim. All right, so Clay, give us some good news.
Once again, I'll piggyback on Amanda. We also had a 100% graduation rate in the Supply Chain Now team. That said, I did graduate this semester from the University of Georgia, which has been awesome. It's been a wild ride. So, everybody that's been behind me on that's certainly thankful. But with what Amanda said about, the need for distance learning to become more efficient and effective, little anecdote, one of my projects, we had an exchange student from China who had to go back and do her virtual learning. in China via UGA still. So, she was, we would have projects meetings, regular time EST, and then she's getting up at like 3-4 in the morning in China and was just really resilient. And I know she's one of a million, people that had to do that and fight through that. So certainly a lot of resilience from this class of 2020. So that's some good for me.
Yeah, that's a great call out there. I mean, we take for granted oftentimes how good we have it. Talking about silver linings, the pandemic, hopefully it's been a great dose of reality. And I know we're not in November anymore, but Thanksgiving is my best favorite holiday of all time because it's just focused on gratitude and being thankful for what you have. And Clay, that's a great comment and really a great way to wrap up today's live stream. You're going to have to, you got a bunch of folks wishing you congratulations there in the comments, Clay. Yeah. So you've got a lot of work to reconnect with them. Hey, let's see. Madison, one of our first timers, was from, let's see here, Indianapolis, freight broker in Indianapolis, and she is trying to close her prospects. Hey, hopefully you get those closing ratios up and you get some good news here, Madison. Great to have you with us here. And AA said it's the first time he's been here on live stream with you and Amanda, you and Clay, which is outstanding. Great to have you here, AA. All right, so folks, great conversation today. Mike Griswold, really enjoyed it. We missed old Greg White. He'll be back with us again on Monday as always. It's gonna have to be an extra spicy edition of the Buzz to make up for lost time, maybe.
We'll have a lot of hot takes all ready to go, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh, he's gonna be back full force. But really enjoyed Mike, really enjoyed wrapping up with Amanda and Clay's point of view. Of course, comments from all the community. Really, that makes it worthwhile. Y'all keep that coming. Hope you, wherever you are, you and your families have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season or end of year, or you name it. And we'll sign off here today with challenging you, just like we challenge our team every single day. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. Be like Clay Phillips, who graduated from the University of Georgia.
Yay.
Big things lie ahead. Oh, the places.
We're very proud of you.
Oh, the places you'll go. High five. Everyone have a wonderful end of the year, and we'll see you on Monday at 12 noon here on The Buzz for Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.